Hello everyone, I am Wendy with Winds of Change Ministries, and today I'm going to knock out Moses' time in Egypt. So last we heard he had gone down into Mitzrajim, Egypt with his brother, and the Most High told him that he was going to be like God, and Aaron was going to be his prophet. The light bearer. That's what Aaron means. So, when he goes to Egypt, he met up with the Jewish people down there, the children of Israel, and they were pretty excited actually to have him, to hear that, wow, there's a God who loves us. Now, Moshe went down when he was 80 years old, and the time that they spent in Egypt was 430 years according to the Bible, according to Genesis. And once upon a time, way back when, I did do a math count on it. And actually, that 430 years goes to the time that I believe it actually began from the time that God gave the promise of the covenant. Okay, so which Abraham was going in and out, and even Isaac was going in and out of Egypt. No, Isaac never went into Egypt. My mistake. But Moses did, and Abraham did, and then Jacob did as well. Okay, now they weren't servants that whole time, but they did go in and out. And I do believe that 430-year count began when the Most High made the covenant and the promise, okay? Because they were at their mercy because of droughts and stuff. And so anyway, Moses went, talked to the people. They were glad to find out that there was a God that cared about them. And so he didn't have to do those tests, those proofs to the children of Israel. He took a group with him to the Pharaoh to make a plea asking, hey, let us go into the wilderness for 3 days so that we can make offerings to our God. And he didn't know who their God was. Okay, he's like, I don't know this God. I've never heard of them. Now, in the Egyptian pantheon, there are many gods. Okay, and yes, there are many gods in the Egyptian pantheon. So, but he had never heard of that one. All right, and he who exists, Yahweh. So he kind of just blew him off. Well, then Moses took his staff. He was told, God told him to do it, and he told this to Aaron. And so they took that staff and they cast it to the ground, and it became a snake. And you would think that would terrify somebody, but it didn't, because the Egyptians, they had their own magical powers, and they cast their snakes to the ground. Now, what happened after this kind of surprised them a little bit, because the staff of Moses, which turned into a snake, started eating all the other ones. So it was different than theirs. It was a cobra. And that the symbolism of it's a king snake, okay? King snakes are any kind of snake that is able to eat other snakes, okay? That's a king snake. Cobras are one of those, okay? And also, cobras rise up, okay? They can actually look like they're standing. They can come very tall, depending on how big the snake is, okay? And cobras can get very, very big. So they can get close to your face height very easily, all right? Because they get big. Anyway, So, yes, his snake was a king snake. This actually, I will talk about it in a future video, but there's a lot of symbolism to that king snake, okay? But for now, let's move forward. The Pharaoh was not impressed, and he said no. Well, later on, I got ahead of myself, darn. Okay, when Moses went and talked to him the first time, he was kicked out. This is before the snake, and he got kicked out of the king's hall. And in fact, he says, you know what, these Israelites, they're idle. That's how dare they ask to go and worship someone who I don't know. So he actually made their work harder. He said, now we would give you straw to make your brick. Now you got to get your own straw, make your brick, and keep your quota, your daily quota. Okay? And so that really made their work very, very difficult. And they came to Moses and complained about it. And so Moses took it to God. God told him, hey, let's start doing some of these signs. Okay, that's where the snake came in. All right. Well, that didn't impress him. So then God did another sign. He told him to hold the staff over the river and let it turn to blood. And so Moses was obedient, and the river turned to blood. Okay. Now this is the first of the 10 plagues, where hardship. See, that snake didn't cause any hardship to Egypt. However, now the water turning to blood, that caused hardship. So that's the first of the plagues, and there were many plagues. Okay, and so after the blood, then came the frogs. Okay, and with each of these, the Pharaoh would call Moses in and tell him, "Hey, let's go ahead and fix this. Ask your God to fix this." See, because the magicians, they were able to turn water to blood too, but they could not undo it. Okay, so now we're coming into things that they can't compete with. All right, and so to make the water turn back to water, to make the frogs go away, because frogs came from that bloody water. Okay, the Pharaoh had to call Moses in and ask him to plead to his God. Okay, this God that he didn't believe in. Now is like, hey, can you ask your God to fix this? He was wanting proof. Okay, but still, God had hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did it intentionally. He told Moses exactly what he was doing, and he said that when they left, that they were going to leave with wealth. Okay, that the Egyptians were going to give them wealth. And so anyway, as these plagues continued, so we got the flies, we got the hail, we've got plagues on the livestock. Now, when these more harder punishments came, God even said, because Pharaoh wasn't impressed about the flies and the frogs and the fleas and the frogs and different things like that. He's like, but then Moses said, oh yeah, well, let me show you something. It's going to happen to your people, but not to God's people. All right. All these plagues, they're not going to affect all of us. They're only going to affect your people. That way you can see that there is a distinction between the way God treats his people and the way he's going to punish your people because of your hard heart. But God was good, and he warned every time a hardship came. He warned. Okay, he's like, hey, I've got hell coming. You're going to want to call in all your servants, because if you don't, they're going to die in the fields. Okay, so he was very good, and tried not to make the devastation be too bad on the innocent people. But Pharaoh's heart still, it just wasn't It wasn't softened. Then we had some, I forget all of them. There were so many. We had the 3 days of darkness, and it was so dark, no one could do anything. But there was light in the tents of Israel. Okay. Anyway, as we're moving through these plagues, every time the Pharaoh would start to retract and soften a little bit for a moment, and he's like pray for me and this and that, and then he near the end he was willing to wheel and deal. He was like, well, I'll let you go, but what do you want to take? What are you planning on taking? And Moses said, we're all going. Women, children, we're even taking all of our livestock with us. And so Pharaoh was like, oh, no, no, no. You men can go. Leave the women and children here. You men can go. Honor your God, blah, blah, blah. And but when he found that they wanted to just pack up and go for 3 days, well, he didn't trust that. So he's like, no, 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 you don't. So his heart hardened many, many times, several times there at the end. And anyway, then when it came to the Passover, right, when the shadow of death was going to pass over. Now, this is where the Almighty tells Moshe that this is going to be your first month, okay? And it's in the spring. Now, prior to this, the first month was in the fall, okay? And the Jews, even today, they recognize 2 calendars. But for Israel, God said, I want this to be your first month, okay? And certain things happen for that calendar. It is not the social calendar or whatever. It's not like for normal things. This is strictly the religious calendar, okay? And it begins in the spring. And anyway, so, and he told them on the 10th of this month. So a new month always begins right there at the new moon, when there's no moon in the sky, okay? So he said, on the 10th of the month, that is when I want you to go get your Passover lambs. And so that's what happened, okay? So the Passover lambs were gathered, were taken, and then he gave them very specific instructions. He said to on the day of the Passover, which would be the 14th, to go ahead and slaughter the lamb. Only picks enough for a sheep, a lamb, or whatever for your family, okay? Because you got to eat it all in one day. And after that, then it's over. Okay, you gotta, whatever's left, you gotta burn it. You can't keep it. Okay, now this is significant. Okay, because I told you before that the first day of the 7,000 year, right? A day is 1,000 years. And that's not specific, that's a segment of time, okay? And it's a step. So that first day was Adam's life. He lived till he was 930. The second day is Moses' life. He lived until he was 960 years old. Now we had a bunch of things happen, right? And we're dealing with this area, this segment of time is the formation of God's covenant, okay? And then, the promise of Canaan, that's the third day, all right? Now, this fourth day, which is what this Passover lamb signifies, this represents the time that Israel is actually in the promised land, because once he told them, once you, get into the land of milk and honey, right? The land of Canaan, and it becomes yours. Then I want you to practice this behavior, these rituals. And so this is when Judaism, right now we don't even have Judaism right yet, okay? It hasn't even been formed yet because we don't have the laws, okay? So once those are established, then it starts a new day, all right? So anyway, God is now starting to give them an idea of what he's expecting. They had the Moses calendar, and now there is a new, they had the Noah calendar, which began in the fall. And now there's a new calendar being established just for Israel. Why? Because the Most High wanted to set his people apart, okay? They're set apart. They weren't following what the rest of the world was doing, the rest of the descendants of Noah. Okay? So, anyway, yes, they were set apart. This is an example of that. And so are the plagues against Egypt, Mitzrajim. Okay? So, anyway, I will tell you that when the Passover came, they were told also to put blood over their door. That way the shadow of death would not kill them. It was a sign for the shadow of death not to go. Now, when God was telling all of this to Moses, he told them, and I want you to borrow jewels of gold and gems and different things from the Egyptians. And this was meant to be part of the wealth that would be given to them. And the Most High, in most interpretations of the Bible, it says that Pharaoh would send them out altogether. That's one way to interpret it. But in my interpretation, it says, and Pharaoh will send you out like a bride, because they were adorned with gold and jewels, okay, as like a bride. And so they were supposed to go from Egypt into the land of milk and honey like a bride, okay? Now I'm going to share something with you. God said, that he wanted his people, the children of Israel, to come out of Egypt, Mitzrayim, okay? And there is some really juicy information that goes with that, okay? Associated with the bride, and I will be sharing that in my book, God's Master Plan for Salvation, okay? Because I'm not going to give you guys everything. I'm not going to give you everything. But there is a really fascinating connection between all of that, okay? So, my name is Wendy, and we're all living in the winds of change.